seriously popular.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Magaland. It's been a crazy weekend in the Trump universe. We had the White House Correspondents' Dinner weekend, and Trump was in Rome for Pope Francis's funeral. So there's been a lot of drama that we are so excited to be here to unpack today. We have John Michael Rosh back with us. He's going to break down everything glitz and glam when it comes to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Daily Mail did an exclusive party with Brunswick Group at the British ambassador's house. So we had a lot of VIPs and stars on the red carpet that he spoke with directly. We'll also break down what exactly happened inside Pope Francis's funeral, including a meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy. Turning back to the White House. Today, the White House has gone all in on migration and deportations. They displayed over 100 mugshots of illegal migrants on the White House lawn. We have new 100-day polling showing that Trump is underwater in his approval rating, particularly in one area. And Pam Bondi made good on her threat to arrest judges who are impeding the Trump administration's deportation policy, as a Wisconsin judge was spectacularly arrested. We'll look at 60 Minutes going rogue with their messaging around the resignation of executive producer Bill Owens. And finally, Trump wants Columbus Day back. We'll unpack all of that and more right after this break.
Welcome to Magaland.
And we're back here in Magaland, and we're so lucky we have John Michael and also Kelly, who were present at these events in DC. That's Politicos mingling with the DC press every year. I saw some pictures, some best dressed list. John Michael, as Kelly said, was running the red carpet. What can you tell us happened at the British Embassy? I was quite feeling FOMO.
It was a fantastic event. Daily Mail threw a party with the Brunswick Group at the British ambassador's residence at this exclusive, beautiful home with sprawling gardens. And it looks like it's out of an English cottage or something. It's just beautifully designed. But the night kicked off with us at the blue carpet, saying hello to guests as they walked by, snapping photos, shaking hands, just really feeling the pomp and circumstance of the fun weekend. Some of the folks that I talked to that crossed our blue carpet include Savannah Chrisley, who's been a rising star. She had her own TV show with her family and now has been advocating for some conservative things. So we saw her, caught up with her. And we also spoke to a couple other interesting Magaland people like Sean Spicer, the former press secretary for Trump during his first term. I was going around talking to folks, obviously celebrating the weekend, but focusing on Trump's first 100 days and getting people to rate and review how he's doing. Now, obviously, it's a very MAGA-friendly crowd at these events, so everyone was giving him glowing praise. One person in particular actually worked for Trump, and that would be Dr. Oz. He's running the Centers for Medicare, and he told me that he would give Trump a 105 out of 100 for a rating in his first couple days. So he's obviously praising his boss, giving a wonderful review. And that was kind of the vibe for the entire evening and weekend. Most folks were very pro-Trump, had lots of good things to say, and other folks that maybe didn't have anything good to say kept their mouth shut. It was interesting to see folks that were walking past and in their finest tuxedos and their finest attire, just mingling, hanging out, enjoying the time with the press. Also some interesting political power players that aren't necessarily in the administration. It was a fun glitz and glam event. And I know Kelly was there too. Kelly, did you enjoy the blue carpet as much as I did?
Yeah, one of my favorite spottings was Sean Spicer. We've had him on Magaland before. So he was putzing around, talking to everyone. People were taking selfies with him. So he's back in the limelight. Like he was saying to us, he missed out on that opportunity really in the first term, but now he's really leaning into it. Also, the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, Doug Collins, was in attendance. He was speaking with our reporters, and he was very complimentary of the Trump administration. As a former House member, he knows how to work the crowd and the media. It was fun to see him now that he's taken on a more senior position in the cabinet. There's obviously a lot of Hill staff at the party. So, members working for Speaker Mike Johnson and the leadership, John Thune's office. A lot of movers and shakers in DC, and it was quite fun to see everyone together. Obviously, Daily Mail always does it big and bold, and I think this event was really fun to see everyone gathered. It was a true Magaland event from inside out.
And that was, of course, preparation for Saturday night, which was the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which this year was quite different, right? There was no comedian host. The president was not there. I love, though, the pictures I kept seeing of the media rivals mingling together, particularly, as we call him, CNN's black sheep, Scott Jennings, was taking selfies with all the CNN progressives we always see him fighting with. So it was interesting because the juxtaposition of the country appears more divided in some ways because the president didn't even show up. But at least we're seeing people with difference in politics taking pictures. What did you guys think?
Actually, Scott Jennings was one of Daily Mail's guests. And so I was with him for most of the pre-party portion. And I actually saw his selfie with Caitlin Collins happen in real time. She ended up posting it on her accounts later. That was a perfect example where she grabbed him and wanted to get a selfie with him. And he was like the man of the hour. Everyone was coming up to him. There was Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, came up to him. They had a great chat. And then one of Wes Moore's staff actually grabbed him and said, "I thought you were going to be press secretary." And Scott brushed it off. He was like, "Oh, you never know. I'm enjoying my gig, whatever." But it was fun to see like the lefties coming up to him and wanting the selfies and wanting the time with him.
Totally. I also saw him posing with Abby Phillips. Here, as a reporter, I covered their on-air spats all the time, so it was certainly interesting. There was a reporter from Axios, right, that went up there and kind of had a mea culpa about how they covered the Biden administration. Sorry, what was that all about?
Yeah, that was Alex Thompson, an Axios reporter. He's in the spotlight now for writing a book on Biden's decline, co-authored with Jake Tapper of CNN. And he got up and accepted an award for his vigorous reporting on Biden's age and kind of the cognitive decline. He was one of the only White House reporters that was on that beat consistently last year. But he did get up to the stage, and when he accepted his award, he admitted in a very sober moment that Biden's decline was obvious for so many to see, and the reporting came much later than it should have. He gave the entire room a gut check when he said, "We dropped the ball on this one a little bit." And I think that most journalists in the room would say that as well. Clearly, there was signs of Biden's health kind of going downhill. Obviously, the age thing was the main issue. But in a sober moment, to be able to say that to a lot of colleagues that, hey, we missed the ball, that was a very impactful moment. And kudos to him for having the wherewithal to go up there and say that to a room of his colleagues, telling them next time we could do better.
That's so important. And I hadn't thought about the importance of that actually for this particular group of journalists who did not tell the full story, even though they knew there was more to tell. And I think there has to be a bigger reckoning talking about how people have lost trust in the media. I think we need to hear from more outlets about that. What happened there for Americans to really regain trust in the media? But were there any other people from Trump's cabinet, or did everyone get an order that they're not allowed to party with the White House correspondents?
I personally didn't see any cabinet members at the dinner itself. I will say the one celebrity that I ran up to take a selfie with was New York Mayor Eric Adams. He was walking out as I saw him, and I screamed out, "Mr. Mayor, come take a selfie with me." And he kindly obliged, flashed a large smile, told me to have a lovely night, and continued out the door. But that was my fun celebrity moment.
I also thought an interesting aspect of the night was that the Associated Press took home one of the biggest awards, and they have obviously butted heads with the White House. And then I saw some really savage trolling on social media from the White House cabinet officials because during this weekend, the Associated Press quietly removed a story that they had previously published about Tulsi Gabbard and some of her past remarks about Assad and her being very cozy with him. They removed that story. There was some good trolls where they were like, "Oh, the Associated Press won this award for total transparency and reporting accuracy," but then they just removed this story that had painted Tulsi Gabbard, now the head of intelligence, in a very poor light. So I thought that was fun to see. And I know a lot of the White House officials and some of the cabinet officials were at an after party that was called the Executive exclusive after party. It was launched by one of Don Jr.'s close allies, Omi Malik. So they were all gathered there. Caroline Levitt was there, some other of the MAGA influencer types. So they did their own party at the tail end of the dinner, and then some people from the dinner went over after as well.
I predict that next year they'll have their whole alternative party situation with the cabinet, and they'll really compete against the White House Press Association.
John Michael, thank you for being here to break down the Correspondence Center. It was great seeing you, and we'll have you back on.
But another story over the weekend that I've been obsessed with, because I'm obsessed with the upcoming conclave, the Pope's funeral. We knew on Friday that we would be discussing it on Monday, and wow, so many headlines to discuss from this funeral. On Friday, we said Trump might not have been happy that he was not first row, but he was first row wearing a blue suit. Do we know what happened there in terms of the new seating arrangement?
Yeah, it looks like it wasn't what we were anticipating, that he'd be a few rows back. He was squarely in the front next to Melania. There was some murmurs about the fact that he was wearing a blue suit and a blue tie because Joe Biden was as well. And I guess protocol is that you're supposed to wear a black tie. So there was some murmurings that they were snubbing the funeral, but I don't think it was intentional, if anything. It still looked very put together. Melania looked stunning in her black veil, lacy veil, looking very serene on her 55th birthday, very somber. It was quite a moment. Just moments before the funeral kicked off, Trump and Zelenskyy sat down in St. Peter's Basilica, which I found just the choice of venue to be quite shocking. I'm so surprised there wasn't like a side room they could have used, but they were in the Basilica in this grand, beautiful church, sitting there having this intense discussion over Ukraine-Russia war.
So I want to discuss several things about this meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy. That image gives me chills. We often forget in today's world, the Vatican is not as important in foreign affairs and geopolitics as it once was. But that image really just got me to think, yeah, this institution is older than the US or Ukraine. So the fact that these two leaders who have struggled to come together would do so under this beautiful ceiling that we all know in two simple chairs, just face to face. I think Trump had a different tone about the war after this moment. Also, can we talk about this moment between Macron and Trump? It appears Trump told Macron, you should not be here, in the meeting between Zelenskyy and him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looked like there was some uncomfortable moment that happened where Macron came up to Trump and Zelenskyy. He shook hands with Zelenskyy, and then he snubbed a Trump handshake and this sort of like beard dance around as they were just kicking off the meeting. So it seemed like Trump was trying to shoo him away. He just wanted to talk with Zelenskyy, but Macron was encroaching. It was a weird moment to kick off the meeting. And then the two finally sat down and had their chat, where it looked like they were engaged in a productive discussion, very different from what we saw in the Oval Office a few months ago when they had that explosive conversation. It looked like they were taking each other very seriously in a very calm demeanor about President Trump and Zelenskyy. Then after the funeral wrapped up, Trump was back on Air Force One and he started putting out True Social tweets, basically changing his tune a little bit about Putin. He was not as complimentary as he had been in the past. He seemed frustrated that Putin was still sending missiles and bombing areas of Ukraine after these talks have been ongoing, especially in the ramp up this week. Also, we have to keep in mind that Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, met with Putin in Russia on Friday. There's been a lot of diplomacy going on behind the scenes. And Witkoff somehow struck some sort of deal with Putin, perhaps, or they got to some sort of terms, because then days later, earlier this morning, Putin said that he's enacting a ceasefire for a couple days in early May. So there's been a lot going on behind the scenes. We obviously saw foremost the picture of Trump-Zelenskyy meeting. We don't know if Trump and Putin have spoken over the weekend or since this or any time in between. We're still trying to get details on that. So it's very much a fluid situation. But I think Trump and Zelensky's striking meeting did hit home in some ways to Putin, because those images, as you mentioned, are undeniable. Just looking so small in the sheer vastness of the basilica, it was really quite remarkable.
Totally. We've talked on the pod how Trump works. And it really is about the last conversation that he had. A lot of people were also asking or suggesting that this one-on-one situation in the context is the best way to deal with Trump. If we remember the meeting at the Oval Office, that was a media circus. JD Vance was there, appeared, he wanted to get a point across. A TV moment that perhaps was not appropriate for a situation where so many people are dying every day. I definitely think this demeanor between the two leaders, and our lip reader said that they were talking about Zelenskyy needing reassurance, and Trump told him something like, okay, I'm reassuring you right now. And then we see that post where Trump criticizes Putin more than he has done in a while. Maybe that's what was needed for Putin to agree to something, just a little more aggression from Trump. We talked about the Axios journalist admitting that the media dropped the ball on Biden. Biden was at the funeral being helped to his seat. Wow.
He was not looking well. He had his hand gripped around Jill's, and a cardinal who was leading them to where they were supposed to be seated looked like he was fully leaning and hanging on his arm. Like he barely walked down these shallow steps to his seat for the 3-hour plus ceremony. So imagine if he was reelected. This is what we would be seeing right now, just him as president on the world stage. Like, would he have been able to have that conversation with Zelenskyy? Probably not. I'm sure his handlers probably would have ushered them into a closed door session far away from any TV cameras or media. But instead, we saw Trump coming out forcefully and strong, wanting it to be made public that they were having this meeting out in the open. So it was really shocking to see Biden looking so frail. But it was also interesting to see another moment during the ceremony where Melania whispered to Trump, and it looked like it was during the sign of peace. And Trump was looking around and she whispered to him, like, I think you should shake hands, essentially. So then he started shaking hands with some of the world leaders around. And we have to remember that Melania is the Catholic in this relationship, so she would know that protocol.
Yeah.
But it was funny to see her. This is a very wifely thing to do. Whisper to your husband, come on, you got to shake hands now. It gave some light into their relationship in a lighthearted way, which I thought was fun.
Another moment I wanted to mention of that when they returned home, because it was her birthday and there was a lot of commentary because they landed and each went their separate ways.
Melania was going back to New York to see Barron, and Trump headed to his Bedminster golf course. So they didn't even spend her birthday evening together. They had enough time on Air Force One, it appears. So
I think she had enough.
Yeah, they do like their space. That's very clear. So I think that they spent enough time on the plane and she was good.
Definitely. We're going to be back right after the break with more Magaland updates.
We are back in Magaland. Today, a flurry of new polls showed how Trump is faring nearly 100 days into his second term. Tomorrow is the actual 100th day, so that's pretty wild. We've made it so far. Trump has done a lot. Congress has done a lot, but now Americans are actually weighing in on some of his policies, and Trump isn't too happy with these polls. He was up early this morning, ripping into Fox News, ripping into some of these he called, quote, negative criminal pollsters that are showing his approval plummeting. And a lot of these polls show him at about a 40% approval rating, which still isn't that bad in the scheme of approval ratings and presidencies, but it is a dip from where we saw him when he first took office. And also, they looked into the impact of his tariffs. And Fox News had a very shocking finding. They found that only 33% of Americans approve of Trump's tariffs, which is really quite remarkable, especially from a poll coming from Trump's most trusted media news source. And he wasn't happy. So he ripped into them. He was going on a tear about it. And I imagine that he'll probably be lambasting these news organizations tomorrow as he gives his big 100-day speech in Michigan.
And this drop in polls numbers, it has to be all tariffs, right? Because his supporters are super happy, it seems, with what he has done in immigration, really everything else. And I think we can take Fox News as evidence to that, because Fox News in general, as a network, they have been very critical of these tariffs. And now they're taking that to the next level, showing the polls. So how far is it going to drop? Is Trump going to change direction? Or is he going to continue saying that these polls are lying? Because these polls have not always told the full story, we now know, especially when it comes to Trump.
Largely in part because of these polls, the White House actually scheduled a very early press briefing this morning with Caroline Leavitt and border czar Tom Homan. So normally Caroline Leavitt will brief the media in the early afternoon, usually around 1 p.m., but they did an early briefing at 8:30 a.m. this morning where it was all focused on border security. And they lined up 100 mugshots of all these illegal migrants who were arrested for just despicable crimes all across the White House lawn. So they're making a huge statement saying it's almost 100 days. Our best issue from these polls and from speaking to Americans is immigration and Trump's deportation policies, which are pretty popular even with Hispanic Americans. So they're leaning into this. I think we'll see throughout the week other areas in these polls where he's doing better and the White House seizing upon that and touting them, which I think they should do because that's good strategy. We heard directly from Tom Homan actually on Kristi Noem's stolen purse, because we found it over the weekend that it was an illegal migrant who nabbed her purse. He said that illegal migrant messed with the wrong person. So he had sort of choice words for this individual who's accused of doing this crime. That was the first time we heard the White House fully comment on what was going on after the arrest of this migrant.
How convenient for the thief to be an undocumented migrant. I read it was a career criminal from Chile, and I still have so many questions because did he know who she was?
He must have, right? Because we talk about her as Ice Barbie. She's on TV. She's doing media blitzes. She's always filmed wherever she goes. She is a glamorous girl. And we have talked about her wearing her Rolex all the time.
That's
so he
true.
must have known that if he was going to steal her purse, he would get some sort of jackpot and be worth it. But probably not the wisest idea to go after a secretary when they have a security detail and the full weight of law enforcement is on her side. I think there was another accomplice who was also arrested. So we're getting a little more details on that individual as well.
To go back to what you were saying, and I think the White House is so smart with that, Caroline Leavitt particularly, and when the media is asking about something negative, she just replies with, look how much the border crossings have dropped. And I definitely think that's what they're going to be doing this week, especially because over the weekend, they had some really good publicity in terms of migrant arrests. In Colorado, they went to a club and they arrested over 100 undocumented people. They were actually active service members that were in this establishment and even working as guards. Of course, the White House has blown up those images everywhere of these migrants being arrested, as you mentioned, on the White House lawn. Also, we have to discuss, because this really shows how they feel empowered because people support this. A judge in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was arrested because she has been accused of trying to keep ICE from detaining an undocumented migrant that was having a court hearing over assault allegations. This is a huge escalation, Kelly, because of course, we're so divided. On the right, people were like, yes, put her in prison for life. This is what I voted for. On the left, people are saying it's starting. They're going against judges. Of course, the judge says that they didn't come in with the right warrant, and she denies that she was trying to hide the migrant. She says she just asked for the hearing to conclude. But I think this case is about to become a fighting call for both sides.
We got word on Friday that this judge in Wisconsin was arrested for allegedly helping a migrant evade ICE and evade deportation, which, if is found to be true, is quite stunning because no one's above the law, particularly judges who know the law like the back of their hand. It's crazy. And Pam Bondi had promised that they would do these arrests, and she made good on her word. She was talking about how this migrant in particular had a series of really horrific crimes alleged against them. In particular, this would be a really horrible individual and presumably to have out on the streets. It was shocking to see the visuals of an established judge in the community getting arrested with the ICE agents surrounding her,
On
you
the
know, her getting
job.
taken
It's
in.
just the
Yeah.
visuals of it all are wow.
I think it shows that the Trump administration is not messing around when it comes to these deportations. They've shown this time and time again. Tom Homan today at the press briefing was talking about how there's 85 more miles of border wall that are being actively constructed. So Trump's still making good on that side of his plans to shut down the border with physical barriers. And then we see the judges getting arrested. There may be more to come. It seemed like they're really taking this seriously. And now even some MAGA allies, including Steve Bannon and some more on the far right, are suggesting that Trump suspend habeas corpus protection under the Constitution in order to deport even more illegal migrants, which the White House, Caroline Leavitt, said she had not heard that being discussed by the president. So she tramped that down. But it is important to note because, of course, the MAGA influencers have so much sway over the president. They're really good at getting the MAGA supporters riled up, especially if they have influential podcasts and clips and everything going out about it. So that's definitely one we'll be keeping an eye on.
And I do think it's going to escalate so much because they do have this mandate. I was looking online and people were foaming at the mouth with this arrest. Like they want anyone who's standing in the way of these deportations to be punished. And I think Trump knows that's the case. So they're going to be highlighting it. The White House announced a new executive order about sanctuary cities. Let's take a listen.
Order on sanctuary cities. The first EO will strengthen and unleash America's law enforcement to pursue criminals and protect innocent citizens. The second EO is centered around protecting American communities from criminal aliens, and it will direct the Attorney General and Secretary of Homeland Security to publish a list of state and local jurisdictions that obstruct the enforcement of federal immigration laws. After these are signed, the president will have signed more than 140 executive orders already, rapidly approaching the total number signed by the Biden administration over the course of 4 years in office.
I think this clip shows exactly what the Trump administration had promised. And we've already seen Pam Bondi sue Chicago and New York over their sanctuary city policies. So I think this is a warning sign to any other cities across the country that are harboring illegal migrants, are making it harder for ICE to do their jobs. Basically, what they're saying is that Trump's Department of Justice will come after them, sue them, and take the migrants. They're making good on their threats with this executive order.
Right. And as I mentioned, the other side says these are just more reaches by the executive against the Constitution and democracy. Meanwhile, people in the media are saying this too. If you guys recall, the 60 Minutes executive producer resigned a while ago, Bill Owens. He said that he was not allowed by the network to continue the journalistic standards that he likes to work under because they did not want 60 Minutes to go too hard against Trump. Now, 60 Minutes Scott Pell had a response to it. Let's take a listen.
Bill resigned Tuesday. It was hard on him and hard on us, but he did it for us and you. Stories we pursued for 57 years are often controversial. Lately, the Israel-Gaza war and the Trump administration. Bill made sure they were accurate and fair. He was tough that way. But our parent company, Paramount, is trying to complete a merger. The Trump administration must approve it. Paramount began to supervise our content in new ways. None of our stories has been blocked, but Bill felt he lost the independence that honest journalism requires. No one here is happy about it, but in resigning, Bill proved one thing. He was the right person to lead 60 Minutes all along.
What do you think, Kelly? Because we have been hearing this from several journalists, and we know that it is true. The networks themselves are saying it, that they lost a lot of viewership after the first Trump term when they were super combative. Even MSNBC is trying to be less combative. So it is kind of true that the networks are backing down.
I thought it was interesting that Scott Pelley exposed what's going on behind the scenes because he's saying that CBS's parent company, Paramount, is trying to strike a deal to complete a merger that would need Trump's sign off. So therefore, people above him are encouraging CBS to be more pro-Trump or Trump friendly, which I don't think they are, by the way. But this is what he's saying. He called it like a desperate bid. He said no one that's working at CBS is happy about it. And I think to do something like that on air is pretty shocking for him to risk that. Obviously, he felt very strongly about it. I also think that there's sort of some things that you don't expose or say on air, and that's definitely one of them.
I think we're going to see a lot of this happening because, like I said, these are people who feel democracy is at stake, and I think a lot of them are going to act accordingly. To finalize things, it's quite early for this. Where did this come from? Because Trump has announced his plans to bring back Columbus Day. Why was he thinking about this at the moment? Unclear. It's only April.
It seemed very random. It looked like he might have had a conversation on an Air Force One with an advisor about it or something, and it was top of mind. But he did exactly what he was setting out to do, which was to trigger the left, because everyone just went up in arms after this random post on a Sunday where Trump was saying he's bringing it back from the ashes. Because as we know, Columbus Day has been like phased out and
It's
Indigenous Peoples Day
now, yes. I don't care what it's called. Do I have to go to work on Columbus Day? That's what most Americans care about. I actually think this is a great example of woke madness, their obsession with hating on Christopher Columbus. Why are you hating on this individual when he was financed and sent by a crown that's still there? If anything, direct your hatred at royalty in general. That's not what progressives do. It makes no sense to me. So talking about the things that are popular for the Trump administration to just troll on progressives, this is one of them.
Trump has vowed to go after woke, and the hate on Columbus Day is a very woke issue. We'll see what happens. I'm sure everyone will still get their day off. I don't think it'll be that crazy.
Not us, Kelly, because we're journalists. So it
Not
doesn't
us.
matter for
That's
us either
true.
way. But it is almost the 100th day tomorrow. We have updated you with all the news over the weekend, and we're going to be back on Wednesday with a recap of the madness. I mean, we've been through a lot.
We really have. It'll be fun to unpack everything, especially Trump's big victory rally in Michigan. We're sending John Michael there, so he'll be there to cover it live. And we'll have a lot more to come as we sum up Trump's first 100 days and everything that's been going on inside Magaland, which has been so fun. So remember to follow us on Instagram at Welcome to Magaland and email us at welcometomagaland.com.
Bye-bye.